Okay, episode 1, Come Together. My name is Ephraim Herschmann. I am starting this podcast in hopes of being able to have a positive voice and influence on a what feels extremely overwhelmingly negative media. The truth is that I try to be pretty thoughtful, nuanced, and open-minded in general in terms of my take on life. And one thing that that spurred me to start doing this, and by the way, I hope for this not to be a one-man show. I hope to get as many guests on as possible, as frequently as possible, because no one likes to listen to one person ranting for an extended period of time, especially day after day after day, or week after week after week. I was listening. Today is Monday, July 15th. 2 days ago, former President Trump was shot at and attempted assassination, and I immediately went online the next morning. So this happened on Saturday. On Sunday, I went online. There are a bunch of obviously emergency podcasts that were being posted, and one guy who I don't listen to regularly by any stretch of the imagination. I've listened to, I think, a total of 2 or 3 of his podcasts. Patrick Bet-David, I believe is his name. He's clearly brilliant. I don't want to say anything bad about the guy. I don't know if I necessarily agree with everything that he says, but he's obviously a very intelligent, articulate, and thought-provoking individual. He hosted an emergency podcast essentially talking about a civil war on the verge, that our country's on the verge on. And while I was listening to that, I really couldn't help but think, this is not one of the things that we should be doing in order to try to resolve the sickness in our nation that led to Trump getting shot to begin with. The rhetoric that was so strong, the feelings that were so strong, the fact that and I've experienced this quite a bit in my life because I kind of have a foot in, I have a foot in 2 very different worlds. I grew up, but I grew up Orthodox Orthodox Jewish, and an Orthodox Jew, and I also, which tends to be actually a pretty conservative group of people. I guess based on the fact that the values are more in line with conservative values, keeping more strictly to the letter of the law of Judaism, letter, spirit, oral law, written law. I'm sure we'll get into plenty of that, but that tends to fall in line with a similar perspective when it comes to conservative values in general. But I'm also part of a very liberal camp. I was a creative writing major in college. I'm a huge fan actually of the beatnik hippie movement. I consider myself to be a creative or a student of the creative ways, and that almost inherently kind of makes me a little bit more inclined to be more liberal with everything, really, just to be able to ask questions and to be able to say why, and to not conform necessarily to any kind of structure if it doesn't really work for any particular person or reason or whatever it is. So I get online on Sunday, the day after Trump is shot at, and I had no intention. I don't know really what I think of him. I think that he is probably the most polarizing figure in history, or at least at the moment. I mean, I can't think of another name where you say where no matter where you are, if you say the name Donald Trump, people are going to react so vehemently one way or another. There's no one that doesn't feel anything about him, which I also think is actually symptomatic of where our culture's at, which is that extreme rhetoric, extreme language, extreme posts and podcasts are rewarded by social media platforms and by and by everyone, really, by news, by social media, by big corporations. It's you get likes, you get views, you get listens, you get money, you get sponsors, you get advertisements for being extreme. And my wonderful wife just walked into the room, and I don't think that should be the case. I think that there should be more rhetoric that's bringing people together. We know that this works historically. We know that this exists. We know from the 60s, from the 70s, from even things like baseball games and sports and anything, that people are brought together and reward either extremely positive or extremely negative behavior. And for far too long, everything's been extremely negative. So anyway, Patrick Bet-David puts out this podcast episode where he's talking about the fact that this country is going to be at a civil war shortly. And if Trump got shot, then this would be a full-on war. I don't know. Yeah, you can turn on the sync. It's okay. Listen, could he be right? Sure. Does someone with several million listens per episode, does him putting that kind of rhetoric out there make the situation any better? I don't think so. I really don't. And I think that just like, and I could be wrong, I'm going to have to fact check myself another time, but I believe that after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, a bunch of people called, James Brown was supposed to play in Boston, I believe, and there was word going around that there was going to be enormous protests, and James Brown was called to try to beg people to keep their heads, to not be violent, to not attack one another, to use their language, to use love, to have a positive reaction to resolve the issue that caused Martin Luther King Jr. to be killed, as opposed to respond with anger. And I can't imagine what kind of anger was felt. I'm sure that anger was a justified and rational emotion. But that's really my goal, is to have a medium where we talk positively, where we explore positive and ideas, and even ideas that we don't agree with, to be eloquent, to understand where the other person's coming from, and to say, you know what, I gotcha, I totally understand why you're saying what you're saying, but it's not for me, it is for me, I have to think about it. And I don't think we do enough of that. I think that the culture that social media, big corporate news, and really technology in general is rewarding is the opposite of that, and I just don't believe that could be, that's all there is to it. So with that, I am Ephraim Herschmann. Again, about myself, I am from a place called Rockland County, New York, about 30 miles north of Manhattan. Born and raised here. I am 28 years old, and I am a husband, and I am a father of one and a half year old. And I work in a small family business. I work with my father, and there is, I think, generally speaking, anywhere between 5 and 7 other people in the company at any given point. A couple of people in the warehouse, a couple of technicians. We sell refurbished or used medical equipment, an extremely niche industry that is, it's really cool actually. And there's a ton to learn, and there's actually very few players in the game, in the medical equipment world, but it's a very, very cool industry, and I've been working with alongside my dad for the better part of 8 years, since 2017. It's now 2024. I really started working with them a little bit, doing some work for him in college. I went to Binghamton University, which is in upstate New York, a little SUNY college, State University of New York, and one of my favorite places ever. To be 19, living in a city of 15,000 people my age is just one of the greatest things in the entire world. As for education, I was a creative writing and literature major, and I can't say that it was the most useful thing. I do think that it is an enormous part of who I am, and has contributed, if not even though it wasn't necessarily professional skills, certainly super, super, super important life skills, ability to really express myself in person and in words, to be able to read what's on a page, what's beyond a page when I'm talking to people, to read people and beyond people, what they're saying beyond what they're saying, to really make connections between things that I would normally not be able to make a connection with. That's actually, in my opinion, the definition of creativity. Creativity is just an association, which is why everyone's creativity is different, because everyone has different life, different set of experiences, different associations. And so saying that I'm recording a podcast at my kitchen table is going to evoke an extremely different image for me, what my parents' kitchen is, what my kitchen is, where I've been living for the last 2.5, 3 years in Hollywood with my wife and child, Hollywood, Florida, that is, as opposed to what anyone listening might perceive, what you might perceive, because your kitchen is surely going to be different. Your relationship with the kitchen is going to be different. Is it a place where your family sat around? Did your family sit around there? Do you have a family to sit around there? What's your connection to them? Was it usually with happy occasions, sad occasions, in between occasions? Were you ever cleaning up the kitchen? Do you ever sit there and just get super frustrated? All these things are, and then when you capture it in words or through storytelling, in a narrative, it's your filming, your music, your writing, you're talking to people, you're sharing, whatever form it may be, it's going to be different for everybody. And that's what I think creativity is. And so what I learned in school, unfortunately, again, was not really too applicable to any kind of professional skill set that I would have inevitably needed for the future. It didn't teach me sales. It didn't teach me how to budget. It didn't teach me how to operate QuickBooks from a small business perspective, how to keep track of leads and clients and customers and how to market. But it just taught me how to think. And I think that I would do it again. It's easy for me to say because I had a family business waiting to join, and a father that was beyond patient with me. I think that for the first 1.5 years of me working for him, I was I was a charity case. I was a charity hire, that I was just kind of trying to figure out what the heck was going on, how the business worked, anything about the business. And I'll go into rather what the business is like, probably with a guest, so we can have the benefit of the back and forth conversation, the emergent questions that that occur, and then the capturing the feelings and just playing off someone. I think is probably a better way to go about it anyway. But so that was where I went to school. So I can't say that I'm extremely qualified for a lot, but I do think that I'm qualified to work with people, to express myself, and to hopefully be a little entertaining. I took a screenplay writing class. I had a teacher, Kevin Oakes, who I actually personally loved. He ended up getting fired for wildly inappropriate rhetoric that was kind of his staple for the better part of a decade. People I know that went to Binghamton, 5, 10, 15 years before me would ask whenever I was at some kind of alumni event or connecting with some kind of alumnus searching for a job. They go, "Oh yeah, is Kevin still there?" And he was unfiltered, and ultimately fired. But that was, I don't even know why I just brought him up. Because I had a screenplay writing class with him, and I'm writing a script. And it's my first time writing a script in my life. You had to try out for his class. You had to send him a couple of samples of your writing, and if he liked you, this was, I think, maybe between 8 and 10 person class. And if he liked what you sent in, then he would offer you an opportunity to join the class. I sent him a couple of poems that I had written, that I learned how to write poetry from my old professor. His name is Joe Weil, one of the most incredible people I've ever met, and one of my favorite human beings on this planet. And Joe taught me how. First of all, he's the reason why I was an English major to begin with. But he taught me how to write. He taught me that a good poem or any good kind of form of writing is honest, is real. He taught me about the beauty of not writing everything romanticized, and that sometimes when you're bleak and sometimes when you're honest about the ups and downs of life and the ups and downs of your relationship to yourself and your friends and your family and God and anyone and anything else in your life, when you're real, that's what makes great writing, And he taught me one of the first things. One of the things that caught me was we were 2 or 3 classes in, and it was my first semester in college. I had a friend of mine, Barry, gentleman from Chicago, who has since started in the music. He's been in the music industry for a bunch of years. Great dude, sweetheart of a guy, and he and I had gone to camp together a bunch of years earlier. We hadn't been in touch, but he saw me transferred into college. I had spent a year abroad in Israel. I spent a semester at a local community college near my parents' house called RCC, Rockland Community College. And then I transferred to Binghamton. So I walk into college, and I see this dude from camp that I hadn't seen in probably 4 or 5 years. Gives me a big hug. Great to see you. What's going on? Calls me 6'3", Sage Trace, because I'm 6'3", and he and I'm telling him, I'm trying to figure out what classes I want to take, and he says, "Dude, you got to take this class with Joe Weil. You got to take it." And I was like, "Who's Joe Weil?" And he goes, "All right, let me explain something." I was like, "Okay." He says, "In Binghamton, in order to graduate, you need a certain amount of prerequisite classes to graduate and a certain amount of what's called upper level credits to graduate, meaning there are basic classes and then there are the more advanced classes. You need a certain amount of advanced classes in order to graduate." He's like, "Even if you don't ever take another English class again, apparently Joe's class is an upper level class, advanced poetry workshop, and he's supposed to be an easy A, crazy dude, a lot of fun." I'm like, "Sweet." I'm like, "When are you taking it?" So he told me when he was taking it, signed up for the class. And, when we sit at, I'm coming from community college from small classes, but formal classroom settings. And his class is in a conference room around a big conference table. Maybe there's 15, 20 people in the class. And, he goes, "Okay, has anyone here written poetry?" Which is a funny question to ask for an advanced level poetry class. Has anyone written poetry? No. Yes, no, a little bit. You want to read what you have, what you don't have, read anything that you've ever written. Sure, yes, great. And, after a class or two of just trying to get a feel as to where everyone was, he said, "How many people like 10 things more than writing?" And, pretty much everyone raised their hands. He goes, "How many people like 20 things more than writing?" And about half the kids, 3/4 of the kids dropped their hands. He goes, "How many people like 50 things, love 50 things more than writing?" And I think at that point, pretty much everyone's hand was down. I don't know. I couldn't think of 50 things. And he's like, and Joe said, and he, this stuck with me forever. He says, a great writer has to love at least 50 things more than writing, because otherwise there's nothing to write about. And the worst poetry and the worst form of writing is someone complaining about how they have writer's block, or my pen has gone dry and my thoughts are blank. He goes, whose thoughts aren't blank? People that love snowboarding, that love their pet fish, that love their siblings, that have a small family or a big family or a complicated relationship. He goes, those are the people that are the best writers out there. And part of our assignment, one of the first assignments of the semester, was to come up with and to write poems about, I think, a bunch of different things other than writing, to pick something as obscure and as specific and as detailed as could be and write about that. And that's what got me really turned on to the whole creative pursuit, the whole creative world. And I've been writing since then. It's pretty crazy, actually. I occasionally go back and look, not very often, maybe once every year or two, and I'll look at my writing from college, what was going on in my life and then. And I would look at my writing I graduated in 2017, so I would look at my writing from 2019, see what was going on with my life then and what changed. And I'd look at my writing from 2021 and 2024, and it's just wild to see. It's wild to see. I wouldn't imagine that I was the same person keeping track of all, that was writing these poems throughout those years. And I guess I'm not, you're not the same person, hopefully, as time goes on. And hopefully every day, one of my favorite Dylan lines is, those who aren't busy being born are busy dying, that's from It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, which for like majority of the outtakes or the versions that are available, it's a pretty tough song to listen to. There's one Bob Dylan album. If you're trying to listen to Bob Dylan and you can't stand his voice and you can't figure out how to get into him, he has an album it's called Live at the Budokan. I believe the Budokan's in Japan. And it is aside from one of the coolest and freshest versions of his songs, because he's constantly changing up the way that his songs are played, his voice is some of the most tolerable I think that it's ever been. It's pretty tolerable in Nashville Skyline, which came out I think in 73 or 74. That was a great album, and he quit smoking cigarettes for months before the project to hopefully get his voice, which he did. And that was one of the better versions of his vocal, one of the better forms of vocal expression for Dylan. But yeah, I mean, looking back at all this, it's pretty wild. So I'm in the screenplay writing class, and Kevin Oakes, who, again, other than saying inappropriate things, and just wildly outrageous things for reactions from people, I can't imagine in a million years that the guy ever did anything, actually wrong. I don't know. I haven't looked into it really. I just heard that he got fired, and and it kind of made sense just based on what was going on in the country at that point. You don't really say those kind of things as a professor and get away with it. But he would say it unabashedly in front of, a 450 person introduction to theater class. I mean, it wasn't really, it wasn't like it was directed at anyone or any kind of particular surprise, I don't think, to anyone. But I guess, the university was doing some cleaning up. So I come into my first script, and I have no idea how to write a script. I've written some poems for the last year or year and change. I have no idea how to write a script. And I write this absolutely awful, god-awful script about this. I kind of was trying to imagine Bert from Mary Poppins, modern day setting, and he was pretty much just a gentleman, and the girl that he was interested in was contrary to the way that the world works, enthused by his gentlemanliness. And that script was awful. The character was bad. The writing was even worse. So he reads the script and he gives it back to me. And he goes, "This is really cool." I said, "Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. It feels good, my first script." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, I never got a script handed in for the first time writer where he writes an autistic character." And I go, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, an autistic character." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I'd written his dialogue in proper grammar, the same way that you would write an essay or the same way that you would write a formal homework assignment. And no one talks that way. So instead of me saying, "Hey, how's it going? What are you up to?" It was, "Hey, it is good to see you today. What a wonderful morning. Would you like to go on a walk with me?" And part of what he taught me and what that taught me was that different mediums require different forms of self-expression. Back to, again, the creative, right? One of the things that I learned from my degree was that every setting really requires a different type of form of expression. Certain settings are a little bit more formal, certain other settings are more informal. Certain moments require that you be a little bit more active and present and participatory in them, and certain moments are okay with you being a little bit more passive. And certain conversations, you might want to talk a certain way around to certain people about a certain topic, and there's certain times where you shouldn't, or where not that I don't know if you could say you shouldn't or not, but it wouldn't be as well received by the person you're trying to interact with. And if the purpose of this podcast, full circle, half an hour in, 27 minutes in, is to bring people together, to come together, to be okay with disagreeing with people and find common ground, then you got to learn how to do this. And I think that's a big problem. I don't think that we do that. And I hope that we can start to. I hope that we can begin to. And and there's going to be a lot of people that I agree with to disagree with. One of the things that I do think, though, I was talking to a close friend of mine, Ari Mendelo, who I'm sure will be on plenty. He and I have been very close since high school. And we were actually roommates. We worked together. We lived together in Seattle for another time, probably our podcast with him. And we've been in touch. We've been as close as could be since, I guess, junior year of high school. And I was talking to him about starting this podcast, and I lost my train of thought. But one of the things that we were talking about, and one of the things we said was that too many people allow other people to come on and say things that are preposterous or harmful or dangerous, potentially, although the line between harmful and dangerous, I think, is a very, very significant line, although it's a little slippery. And for people that say that words are just words or ideas are just ideas, I don't think that they are. I do think that there is a certain level of responsibility to say, listen, I understand where you're coming from. I don't know that I agree because of X, Y, and Z, and to move on and to say, listen, let's agree to disagree. We have plenty of other things that we can talk about that we do agree with, that we do agree about. Let's not let this one negative point get in the way of it. And I don't think that's really done very often. I don't want to call out anyone in particular, but there are plenty of forums where people have controversial characters that express new perspectives or different perspectives or right or wrong perspectives, and there's very little pushback. And it doesn't have to be an aggressive pushback. It doesn't have to be a blow up. It doesn't have to be a name calling. It doesn't have to be one of those reactions that gets all those clicks on Twitter or X or Instagram or TikTok. But it should be a conversation that you should talk about. Actually, I think Rogan was actually really great about that. He's not always great about that. One of the times that he was really great about that was when, I forgot the guy's name, Coleman Hughes, I believe is his name, who is clearly brilliant, so articulate, really, really wonderful. And they were talking about Israel and Gaza, and he allowed Coleman to say his perspective, responded with what he felt, allowed him to respond, and then moved on. But you can tell that he didn't entirely he didn't entirely agree with what he was saying, and that's important to me. And it's important for the audience, myself being the audience, to see, okay, here's one perspective, here's another perspective, there's a pushback, he doesn't necessarily agree, but they're continuing, and it's civil, and it's wonderful, and let's move on. And unfortunately, I don't even think people got the memo, because the next day, all over Twitter, or all over X, I was getting clips from different people on different sides of the aisle, that were either praising Rogan, or praising Coleman, or praising or upset at both of them, or either one of them, and they kind of just looked at they would manipulate the clips to look like one way or the other. And I don't think it's very honest. I don't think it does anyone a lot of good, and I don't think it's a very fair thing to do. But anyway, so that was my degree. I have been working in the family business for the last 7-8 years, as I mentioned. Working with my dad on my relationship with my dad has been one of the most difficult, profound, wonderful, and challenging experiences that I could have ever dreamt of. We are extremely similar in a lot of ways and very different in a bunch of other ways. And me being his son and experiencing his personality from my entire life has led me to be extremely aware of the things I want to avoid and extremely aware of the things that I want to replicate. And so most of the time we get along best when we don't see what the other person is doing most of the day. So, for example, when I started working with him, I would come into the office every day, and my dad at the time valued, like a lot of people do, and I can't say that I blame him, but he valued amount of time that you spent at the office. It was important that when you go to the office, that when the workday comes and you're in a small business and you have sales to make and you have deals to close and you have people to feed and you have employees to support, it's important that you show everyone that you're there. It's important that you show up. It's important that you're there for a long time. That you're there, when everyone gets in, and you're there when everyone leaves. And I, as a spoiled 22-year-old college graduate, thought that was preposterous. And I said, I don't have enough work to do to keep me here for 11 hours or 9 hours even, and if I do stick around for all 9 hours in the office, I'm definitely not working every minute that I was there. And I really feel, and maybe this is just a me thing, but I really feel that whenever I have a time allotted for an activity, I like for that activity to be done as immaculately as possible. So if I'm putting time aside to read a book, if I'm putting aside half an hour to read a book, I feel like if I respond to a text, I'm cheating on my time with that book. And if I'm supposed to be at the office from 9 to 5 and things are slow and I pop on an episode of Entourage, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, second to Sopranos, and even it's still close, depends on my mood, then I feel like I'm cheating on that time with work. And so I felt like I'm going to put in 100% of work while I'm here. But if there's work for me, there's not work for me to do. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be working. Now, I know that from firsthand experience, I know from a lot of my friends that, who are accountants or lawyers or, what have you, any kind of other corporate professionals who have bosses and responsibilities in a very different way than I do, that they don't have the luxury of being able to argue with their dad/boss about the notion of it being preposterous that when it's not busy season and there's literally an hour and a half of work to do a week, that they shouldn't be online, that they have to be online and just looking like they're busy and moving their mouse around. I thought that notion was absurd, and so my dad understood but my dad was a little bit more old school in that perspective. So we ended up coming to the conclusion that I was going to move away. Not because our relationship was so bad, but just because I wanted to try something new. I was moving to Seattle a year or two after I graduated from college. And I was from New York. I'd never been to Seattle. Long story. We'll get into it. We moved to 3 close friends, Chaim, Ari, Sam. And we'd rent a house, and try something new there. And one of the things I was trying new there was working remotely. And we worked together so much better. Oh my God, so much better when we were not in the same space as one another. We would be on the phone constantly throughout the day. My dad is always on the phone, always has been. He doesn't know what to do when he's not on it. Because to him, the last 30 years, time on the phone equals time being productive, equals time selling, equals time making money, equals leads or putting out fires at work or with customers or whatever it is. But being on the phone equals productivity. So he's on the phone all the time, but he doesn't like to ever miss a call. So his phone calls are generally anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute and a half, if you're lucky. So he and I would speak 2 times a day, from New York to Seattle. I would wake up early. I'd wake up around 5:30. I would start working around 6:30, and I'd be done by 2 or 3. I'd kind of log off, but I'd be around to take to deal with West Coast customers or Mountain Time customers, and we just got along so much better because we could talk about work without seeing what the other person was doing. And I thought, because there are plenty of times where we were in the office where I would say, listen, I don't know what you're doing right now, but this is definitely not the most productive use of your time. You could be doing X, Y, and Z. And he looked at me, he was like, well, I don't understand. Why are you leaving work at 5 o'clock? He'd get home at 7:30, 8. But I'd say, but you didn't do anything from 10 to 1:30, and we'd go back and forth about what time, is it more important to be in the office or is it more important to be productive while you're working or whatever it is? So when we weren't in each other's faces all the time, we worked together really, really, really well. And so I picked up a lot and it's incredible what you pick up from running a small business or from helping run a small business, because we'd started a website from the bottom up. So my friend Ari at the time I kind of want to say that he was an industrial engineer, but I'm also not sure. He definitely was an electronic engineer. I think he was industrial. And then he taught himself how to code junior or senior year of college, ended up getting a coding job, working for a company called Cognizant in Chicago. So he moved from the tri-state area to Chicago, and he was miserable. He hated the job. He hated living there. He actually was in Dallas. He trained for 6 weeks in Dallas. I went to visit him. Dallas was really cool. He went to the stock exchange, which is not what you think about when you think of stock exchange, like stocks. You think it's literally cows and sheep and Texas stock, which is wild. So Ari was working for this company, Cognizant. He didn't like it at all. I called him up and I said, I'm thinking of moving to Seattle. We want to start a new website. I know you know how to code. If you quit your job at Cognizant, I will hire you. And I was like, I can't promise a lot of money, but you and I will have a great time. Move to Seattle with me. We'll make enough money to pay rent, to have food, and, we'll figure out the rest when we got there. And he's like, deal. He didn't even think about it. He was just like, deal, done. So we took all his vacation days, and he took all his sick days, and his office thought that he was like dying of some kind of obscure disease, because every time anyone asked him if he was okay, he would just say it's personal, and everyone's like, oh my God, like this guy's about to drop dead. He didn't, thankfully. He's alive and well, and still living in Seattle. So he came to New York. I showed him basically. He spent a couple of days observing the business, seeing what it was like, understanding. We sell refurbished medical equipment, ultrasound machines, patient monitors, EKG machines, bone density machines, any machine that a hospital or a private practice can use, imaging centers can use. We sell refurbished. The market is a brand new machine. Depending on the machine, could be anywhere between, let's say, $50,000 and $150,000 or more. And refurbished equipment you can get starting at $4,000 or $5,000. Generally, on the more expensive end, it kind of gets expensive in like the $30,000 range. It could go up a little bit more depending how new the equipment is. And he just wanted to see how how operations were, how the business was, kind of learn a little bit, and then he went back to Chicago, packed up his stuff. I bought a Prius from my dad for $4,000, I believe. It had 125,000 miles on it. And I packed up my stuff, drove to Chicago, picked him up, picked up his stuff. When we drove cross country. I drove from New York to Chicago, then, Chicago to Seattle. We stopped in a brewery in every state. I'm a big craft beer fan. My taste has definitely evolved over the last bunch of years. I'm definitely going to talk a lot about craft beer because I love it. And we stopped at a brewery in every state across the country. At the time, what do we hit? Illinois, Iowa, Kansas City, although there's 2 Kansas cities and I'm not sure which one it was. Nebraska. Went to Lincoln, Nebraska, because at the time I was going through an enormous Bruce Springsteen phase, which we'll definitely talk about too, because Bruce Springsteen, in my opinion, is one of the, if not the best or most articulate singer-songwriter, I think, in the history of singer-songwriters. I know Dylan, but I feel like, I hope it's not too hot of a take, I feel like Dylan is more like word vomiting, just word vomit creative stories that you just would never dream of putting these words and ideas together, and that's incredible and brilliant in its own right. But Springsteen captures the feelings and the stages of life that people go through starting from when you're a kid to adulthood. He puts feelings into words in a way that I've never seen otherwise, and throughout different phases of my life. So, for example, when I was moving to Seattle, and I was deathly terrified of leaving New York, the whole album of Born to Run was the notion of escaping the things that chained you down, that the whole world was open to you, and that all the possibilities of life are out there, and all you have to do is just be brave enough to take a step out and take it. I wasn't brave, and I didn't think I was brave enough, and that music helped me get through it. And then Darkness on the Edge of Town, the responsibilities of adulthood, and the album is split between absolute tragedies of defeat and these incredible beacons of hope and anthems of conquest, and just a full range and extent of humanity is just so incredible, so breathtaking. I don't know that anyone else captures the human spirit the way that Springsteen did in his career. At least, certainly, from 73, The Wild, the Innocent, the East Street, Greetings from Asbury Park, and The Wild, the Innocent, the East Street Shuffle, till I would say maybe 84, 85. And even Tunnel of Love, I think, doesn't get enough credit, but so it's at 88. So, I mean, he had a good 15, 20-year stretch where he was just the most articulate songwriter and the most emotionally articulate individual in the history. I don't know anyone else that was able to put, and I guess he has the benefit of supplying music to create a tone, to express his words as well. So it's a combination of the lyrics and the tone of the music. But I don't know anyone else that does it like that. That did it like that. I've been a huge music fan my entire life. My perspective is constantly evolving. I'm in a complete opposite of a Springsteen phase right now, which is Grateful Dead jam band kind of perspective. Although I don't know if they're quite so different, but I think that the Dead musically, or at least, the Dead musically are what Dylan and Springsteen are to lyrics. Like, their music is conversational, is saying something, and you have to be, and you got to look out for it. You gotta listen to it. You gotta catch it. So creative writing degree, working in a small family business, working with my dad, working with one of my best friends, living with one of my best friends. Oh man, ultimately having to tell him that they had to get another job. That was tough. And then a couple of years ago, I started teaching high school English. 2 years ago, this is going to be my third year coming up. Teach 9th, 10th, and 11th grade English in a Jewish high school. And that is one of the most incredible and rewarding things in the entire world. And another reason why I wanted to, I'm sure another contributing factor to wanting to start the podcast, which is that education, like a lot of other things in life, could be done so right and so wrong, and the same positivity that it would take to bring people together, to have conversations with people, different types of people, different interests, different traits, people from all over, the same skill, the same thing in your soul that it takes to find that common ground and to work with people and to be positive and to bring people together is, I think, the same thing that it takes to be able to sit in a classroom, to stand in front of a classroom of 20 kids, to sit with 20 kids, 9th, 10th, 11th grade, basic, middle, advanced classes, whatever it is, and find a way to bring out the best in them and to unlock their potential. And to keep an eye, and to remember that that's the goal, to remember that the goal is not to force kids to spit back information to you the way that you want it, the information that you want, the way that you want it, but to give them skills to be themselves and to encourage them to be themselves and to just sit back and watch as they do that, as they succeed in becoming themselves. So that's going to be just a little bit as to who I am. This is the first episode of Come Together. Ironically enough, I'm alone, but first episode of Come Together. I will have a guest on for at least the next couple of podcasts, and I cannot wait. Night, everyone.